Welcome to Dynasty Life. I'm Theo Gremminger. Redraft ends, but Dynasty is life. And today I'm happy to be joined by repeat guest. We keep bringing him back because he always brings the heat, and that's Jagger May of Football Guys. Jagger's putting out a lot of great content, a lot of Dynasty-focused content, a lot of NFL draft-focused content. You're grinding away over Football Guys. What do you have going on this type of year?
We're full into rookie mode. We got a rookie guide coming out. We put out 3 versions. We have our pre-draft one for a lot of you sickos that are doing these early rookie drafts, or if you're doing some startup drafts and you're drafting rookie picks, so you have an idea of what that draft class looks like. Version 2 will have full scouting grades on everything, and hopefully you have all those combine scores, RAS, everything like that. So I'm in the trenches, guys. I'm film grinding. I probably watch like 60 football games a day. It feels like, not really, but that's what it feels like. They all just run together.
Yeah, it's an awesome time of year. And this is earlier than we podcasted together last year, where the evaluative process is interesting, where you get your kind of baseline rankings for guys. Then the college football season happens. So much changes. And even this year, we've had that extra football with the college football playoff, where there's certainly been guys who have gained and lost value. Anybody who you were super, super impressed with in the college football playoffs that you're like, you're taking a step back and maybe saying, this extra bit of information deep in the year helped me out a lot?
A lot of it's the running backs. Everyone has their favorite guy. And I know this is a popular name, especially if you're in a Devi, but TreVeyon Henderson throughout the playoffs has solidified that until we get more information, until we get draft capital, he's my RB2, and I'm probably going to take him higher than even some of the quarterbacks in this class in Superflex. It's been pretty eye-opening on that. And then on the flip side of that, you have someone like Quinn Ewers, who I've given him every opportunity. Texas has given him every opportunity, and he's just not it. He declared for the draft. I'm like, that's wild. Like, I wonder if no one was willing to pay for him in the transfer portal, so that's been kind of interesting here.
I'm not a Quinn Ewers guy either.
Mm-hmm.
And I might not say his name when we do our rookie mock draft. You might have to say it, or he might not get said at all. So I'm totally with you. I talked about Henderson with a number of guests. I've sort of been trying to load in this rookie content. He's super, super interesting because I think he can thrive with fewer touches. Whereas some of the other guys in this draft class who I might be slightly higher on, one of the bets is they're going to handle volume. But in today's NFL, these sort of 200-pound guys who can be high-value touch guys, who can catch the football, have explosiveness. Henderson had the most yards per carry in the Big Ten in like 6-7 years. He was like 7.3 yards per carry. So explosiveness is there. Obviously, we saw the house call against Texas on the catch and run end of the first half. So I think that's a definitely a big name for you. How about this draft class as a whole? Is running back like first and foremost the strength of the class without hesitation?
I'd argue tight end is the strength of the class, and that's crazy to say at this point. I just feel better about that position. But as far as like what you're going to make your easy bets, and it doesn't depend on scheme as much, it is running back. Now, what I want to tell people right now, I only have 3 blue chips that are just studs that I think no matter where they're going to go, they're probably going to win. Everyone else are very, very good players. And why I want to make that distinction is because when we look at the NFL landscape, there's not as many jobs just up for taking as a lot of people think. If we look at what happened with the Cardinals, we thought, well, James Conner can't even finish the season. Surely Trey Benson could get in there, and then he was fighting for touches. So I think that we may see a lot of that with a couple of these guys, and we're going to be holding them, hoping for a Zach Charbonnet or Tank Bigsby year 2 or 3 resurgence.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting way of looking at it, and certainly our ideas of the age apex have changed. And it's sort of a shifting where we used to look at a running back and say, he's 28, he's dead. He's dead in Dynasty. But there's just been these guys who've been able to hold on. Derrick Henry, certainly the guy who just never gets old. And then guys like Saquon actually get a better opportunity a little bit later in their career and then get this sort of renaissance. So I agree with you. one other thing we've seen, certainly with the rise of NIL and guys playing longer in college, the transfer portal has sort of extended a number of college seasons. Things like early entry, those things used to matter to us. Do they matter to us as much in this day and age when evaluating a prospect that's, say, a wide receiver? We used to say, even when a Chris Olave type came out, why did he play 4 years of college? Like, what's going on here? Is there a reason? Mm-hmm. Now it's sort of like we get it, and we're not holding that sort of thing against someone.
Yeah, I think it matters more and less. And that's not so much a cop-out answer. I think it matters more for the people who leave early. If you feel so good that you're saying no to money in college football to go right now because you got guaranteed draft capital, that means you're probably a stud. And I think you really should give them a little bit of boost. Let's say if you're an analytical driven scout or something like that. But for quarterbacks, I don't care at all. I don't care at all with quarterbacks. If anything, I think we're going to see a weird time. Specifically, this year is a weird year where it's pretty weak, where I think more and more guys should stay longer, get more reps, learn, and get more experience, because we're seeing now, like with Anthony Richardson, even Trevor Lawrence to an extent, where these guys get thrusted in and they're told to be Jesus for a franchise, and they're 21 years old and they haven't seen a whole lot. And then we get the Jared Goffs or these other guys or Geno Smiths. We're like, well, why did this guy wash out? Why does Sam Darnold wash out? Because he was 19 when he got into the league and he didn't have a lot of experience, and you gave him millions of dollars in the pressure of an entire city. So like, I'm not surprised he crumbled. So that's my thought on that. Receivers, I think it matters a little bit when they don't come out, because I don't know, if you're not going to be a good route runner, it's probably just not going to happen for you from what I've seen. Running backs, I think we really got to, if they're going to stay 4 years, it's because they know their value isn't the same in the NFL as it is in college, and they're going to make money.
Quarterback's an interesting one, where I would agree with you that I think that experience at the college level is a huge positive nowadays in the NFL. We look at Jaden Daniels, played a ton of games. Bo Nix played a ton of games. Michael Penix was a transfer, played a ton of games, where that they know more about them. It's sort of like Major League Baseball had this awakening years ago where they started drafting college players, where when I was younger, it was whatever high school prospect was the best one and was Major League Baseball draft eligible. Major League Baseball teams would gravitate towards that because of the upside. But the fact that a guy is 21, 22 years old, they started saying we know more about him. Maybe the ceiling might not be there, but the floor is so good and he's ready to play in a year. Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix, compare those two guys to Anthony Richardson, Trey Lance, prototypes where NFL was sort of betting on being able to project him, all the upside. Mm-hmm. This year, I think that you're going to see the first few quarterbacks that get selected are all guys that have a ton of college starts. Whether you are a Cam Ward guy or a Shedeur Sanders guy or not, there are certainly guys who have played at two separate schools, have a ton of college starts under their belts. NFL teams are going to be able to evaluate that a little bit easier. So super interesting one. You brought up TreVeyon Henderson as a guy that you are higher on sort of relative to the class. Was there any other guys that you want to sort of flag plant early? And also give us a guy where you see other people maybe high on this player and you're like, I'm just not there.
I've gotten a lot of flack for this one, and the most glaring one that anyone points out on my big board is Kaleb Johnson. And this is as like someone, you make rankings. This class is deep, and because someone's not in my top 10 does not mean that they're not a good player. It's just that I think, and specifically for fantasy, we underrate how much third down matters for our production, especially as it's more and more the standard to have half PPR, some type of element like that. So Kaleb Johnson, I'm a little bit lower on, just because my comp for him is that he's a fast Najee Harris, and I think that's a good player, but the fantasy mind, they like, well, that sucks. I'm like, I don't know. Like, there's a reason why teams keep like different offense coordinators keep giving Najee Harris the ball is because he's a decent running back for NFL standards. And I think Kaleb Johnson is a good running back, but he just doesn't have a receiving profile. So I'm a little bit lower on him than most. Cam Ward, I am skeptical on. I was a huge Cam Ward fan, am a huge Cam Ward fan, but he doesn't process well. So, or I'm not sure if he processes well because he looks so calm and collected that he always is playing off schedule all the time. And then in college, that looks really cool. Then you see in the NFL, the Justin Fields type players like, well, he can't see the field. And I'm worried that we may see that. So I faded all the quarterbacks a lot in comparison to a lot of the other analysts and stuff. So.
Yeah, Caleb's an interesting one. So Kaleb gets 22 receptions, but Iowa doesn't really pass the ball, certainly to their running backs. So that's one where you've seen a number of guys come into the pros that didn't necessarily catch the ball at the college level and are able to do it functionally. I'm going to be higher on Kaleb than you are, but this is also, I think, a polarizing one, a Jagger, where there's some people that have him running back 2, and then there's other people who have pointed out the things you did, also sort of the straight line speed, just how fast is Kaleb Johnson? He's running through big holes at Iowa. So I've seen that. I'll take a glass half full approach with him. I think that he's a guy who can handle volume at the pros. I think he's every bit 220, had an exceptional season, and continual production, like 10 100-yard games this past year at Iowa. I'm going to be higher on him. Cam Ward is another guy where last summer it was like Shedeur Sanders, QB1, and for me, I was like way ahead of Cam Ward compared to a lot of other people. And now it's sort of like now Cam Ward's going to be the number 1 pick. So I think if I had to bet on it, he'll be the number 1 pick. Maybe he'd fall a couple spots, but he'll be top 5 selection. He's got that cannon. He's got the mobility. Being able to excel in different situations, I think was a positive for him. Earned it, was a guy that was like a lower level type prospect coming out, ends up an Incarnate Word, goes to Washington State, goes to Miami, and at Miami just looked awesome. So I think Ward, it's not a sure thing, but I think that he's got enough there that he can end up being a productive player for fantasy. Never a top 5 type scorer at the quarterback spot, but I think he could give us QB1 years, big time arm. So interesting takes on those guys for sure. Another question I have for you, wide receiver spot. This is sort of my evergreen question. The wide receiver position has been so beneficial to us for fantasy over the last few years. You've had 4 out of the last 5 years where you've had at least one rookie wide receiver as a top 6 scorer at the position, immediate, right out the gate. Guys like Jamar Chase, Puka Nacua, Justin Jefferson. This past year, Brian Thomas, Malik Neighbors. In this draft class, which wide receiver has sort of the highest ceiling based on what landing spot? A dream landing spot for a wide receiver that could give us immediate big-time fantasy production for you would be?
It'd be the obvious one is Tet McMillan, but I'm going to give the controversial answer because, again, like, you're letting me over here spit hot takes, I guess, is that I think Travis Hunter is a very, very good wide receiver. And I think whoever's going to get him, you're going to have a guy who's going to be playing 70% of the snaps on offense, maybe 60%, closer to that Jaden Reed kind of snap share and playing some defense in here. When I have the same feelings with him that I had with Brian Thomas Jr., where I'm like, wow, he's not super polished, but he is such a natural and a freak athlete that everything else is going to come together. So if you want to, like, to me, the most bona fide scheme dependent, doesn't matter. If honestly, if I'm the Titans, I would take Travis Hunter over Cam Ward. That's just me. And that's more, and my hate towards Cam Ward. I was at the Washington State game where he broke out on CSU. I was there as a producer of the radio. I believe in him. It's just more, no matter the quarterback, I worry about the coaching staff that's around them. And I don't believe in Brian Callahan. So that's the caveat there. But I would take Travis Hunter 101 hands down. That dude, he's a monster.
Yeah, he's one of the best players we've seen last 10 years in college. Yeah. And some of the sheer number of snaps he was able to play in a game are just silly. I believe he had like a couple of games where he played like 140 snaps. And that, I think certainly the ceiling outcome would be Hunter. I just worry that there is going to be, like you say, play 70% of the snaps on offense. What if it's 50% of the snaps on offense? And I'm sure that there's going to be certain metrics with Hunter, like yards per route run, things like that are going to bounce off because they're going to use him when he's on the field on offense. I just worry about these old school NFL mentality, haven't done it before, not willing to do it, to really embrace a two-way player like that. And he's just so good as a cornerback where it's like a plug-and-play guy where you're going to get top 5 cornerback production immediately versus a guy like, why would I play? So for me, I get nervous about it. And I think this is one where we're going to have to balance this as dynasty managers. Just how high up are you willing to push Travis Hunter when you could potentially get burned on a guy that's not playing this many snaps? Would you kind of agree with that, Jagger?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. And you're right about like me getting burned on here. And this is for a rookie draft. I would probably take Tet ahead of him. Like I have Tet ahead of him on there. Like that's not I'd take Luther Burden ahead. And especially after the one report where it's 3-1. Granted, some of those are BS. You know, you take them with a grain of salt, but I've bumped him down a little bit. But yeah, I'm still going to take a chance on Hunter because the only fear I have is what you said, is the old school mentality. Because to me, if let's say the Bears were in the opportunity again to draft them and they had Ben Johnson, I don't think Ben Johnson cares. I don't think he's going to give a shit. He's like, okay, cool. You're going to play offense here. Take a breather. And then we're going to put you over here on defense and then play cornerback. So, you know, and well, to me, you should play situational football at that point. You should have them in on most of your offensive snaps, and on defense, you want them in on third down and in 2-minute drill. That's when you want them in at all times. It makes sense to me, but the more I've learned about the NFL, the more I've understand that it's a very old school boys club.
Your guy over at Football Guys, Sigmund Bloom, says we kind of get in trouble when we start thinking about rational coaching, rational decision making. If I'm the head coach, and certainly I think that another factor with Travis Hunter, not to make this a full Travis Hunter show, but there's some of these coaches are going to be like, listen, I need this job. And, my best chance of securing this job long-term is to win games, and having this guy on the field all the time is my best bet. So there's going to be a lot of things to weigh out with Travis Hunter. You're going to start seeing how many snaps he played in a game. Is he playing too many snaps? Like, this is a new era. But the one thing about like sort of rule breakers, outliers, breaking the glass ceiling in pretty much anything in sports is it takes one guy, and then all of a sudden we have an example and we're like, okay, this guy can be the next Travis Hunter. And we've certainly seen that in football continually, where immediate impact rookie wide receivers, immediate impact rookie tight ends, maybe it's an immediate impact two-way player that sort of is the storyline for this. And all these dynasty managers a year from now are like, why did I let Travis Hunter slide to the 201 in my Superflex draft because of fear? So I love that take. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're drafting. We're going to do a Superflex rookie mock draft. Theo Gremminger with Jagger May. We'll be right back.
Oh, I see all this mock draft information out there. Oh, this mock, that mock. Hey, what about a real actual fantasy game? The Flex 4 game on Fast Draft, draftfaster.com, is open. You draft 6 running backs, wide receivers, tight ends. The top 4 enter your lineup every week. It's that easy. It's that simple. Drafts take 5 minutes. There's a $50,000 prize pool. It's $15,000 to first. It's just a $5 entry. And the best part, no rake. No rake whatsoever on Fast Draft, the first 2025 Best Ball contest to open in the world, is ready for you to draft up to 150 teams. Draftfaster.com, draftfaster.com. Start playing Best Ball for real.
Welcome back to Dynasty Life. I did a single QB rookie mock draft with Cody Carpentier. That was a lot of fun. Jagger and I are going to go with a Superflex one. We're going to try to get in 2 rounds. So let's see how this goes. And we have not shared rankings with one another. So we're going old school. I'm actually going to write it down and see which way Jagger goes. You are the guest, so I'll let you pick. Do you want to go with the first pick, or do you want to go with the second pick?
Second pick.
Okay, so you make my life super easy. I'm going to take Ashton Jeanty at the 101. Doesn't matter what format. Ashton Jeanty's your 101. And if you are quarterback needy with your dynasty roster, just trade the pick. If you have to, trade the pick. But Ashton Jeanty's got to be the guy you take. It's just like Bijan all over again in the sense that this is an elite prospect. It's going to have elite draft capital. This could be a player that in a year or two we're taking at the 101 in our redraft leagues. He's the real deal.
Yeah. That's why I let you have the easy one. I'm like, what am I going to say about Ashton Jeanty at this point? Like, he's an easy pick. For mine, I'm going to go with Tet McMillan. I love the point of what you said about if you need a QB. I will take it a step further. If you need a wide receiver, I'm going to go get Marvin Harrison Jr. right now. I'm going to go get Rome Odunze, especially with Ben Johnson now. I would probably take them over Tet McMillan because I know they have a decent QB and I know where their landing spot is. Tet, I love, and I think he has high upside, but I'm looking at these landmines like Cleveland. The Giants would be cool, but he'll never be the alpha there. New England's great. Jacksonville, he won't be the alpha. I don't want anybody in Vegas, but at the end of the day, you want to bet on that talent. So,
yeah, now you kind of scare me a little bit with all some of those landing spots you mentioned, but I do think Tet McMillan, he's got that high target upside. When we hear about a wide receiver with that sort of size, a lot of times people gravitate towards thinking this is a touchdown-driven X who's going to make big plays. Like Tet McMillan, the target upside, though. So for me, I like that. Interesting to bring up those Marvin Harrison Jr., Rome Odunze, because I think that there's a chance to buy those guys for lower than we paid a year ago. That's some high-level dynasty thinking. For me at the 103, this is a really tough one. Now, if you told me Travis Hunter was a wide receiver, it's no question. We're either taking him where you took Tet or I'd take him right here. But for this purpose, I'm going to be the scared drafter. And I'm going to go with Cam Ward because I think he's going to be the 101. And I think it's going to give me enough insulation, him going at the 101, that I'm going to have a sort of a longer rope where he's going to get a chance to get his feet wet and get a chance to thrive right away. And I think when we look at that situation in Tennessee, do I love Callahan? No, but I do think he's going to try to emulate a lot of what they did in Cincinnati. They did it last year with the moves they made, trying to go get guys like Calvin Ridley, going and getting Tony Pollard. I think that there's enough there with Tyjae Spears, Pollard, Ridley, and I think they'll go out and try to surround Ward with some talent and bring in other offensive skill position players. They haven't had a franchise quarterback like this since like Steve McNair, where they've been able to lean into it, get this guy early in his career. So for me, I'll take the value of the quarterback who goes 101. The guy will get a second chance if it doesn't work out in Tennessee. I know it's sort of a cop-out. I'm not super thrilled going quarterback in this class, but I think the 103 feels about right.
Yeah, I don't hate that at all, especially what you said about getting the second chance, the insulated value of being a 101 QB. I think the top of the second round is where we're going to see a huge run on wide receivers. And we were talking a little about pre-show. They can go in and get their quarterback. In the top of the second round, they can get someone like Elic Ayomanor that I really like.
I'd love that one.
Yeah, like Jaden Higgins is something. I'm a big Ja'Cory Brooks fan. They could get him. There's a lot of options, and Calvin Ridley's still there. So maybe I should stop being a Grinch about Cam Ward. I'm going to take who I think is my QB1. It's Shedeur Sanders. I've been pretty high on him early on, and I understand what everyone sees about Cam Ward, but what I like about Shedeur Sanders is that he's had a lot of adversity, particularly around the offensive line. A lot of people complain about him holding the ball. That there's a reason why that first year that they were at Colorado, where they basically retooled and brought in a new coach, brought in a new offensive line that still wasn't quite there. He's a truck, not a trailer. I know I'm not a big chart guy, but Ray Garvin, Ray GQ had a good accuracy chart, and that's what shows up on tape. I think he's the most accurate quarterback and has the best arm talent. Not super mobile, but if he makes a slide to the Giants, I'm all in, and I'll probably have him closer to 102 than anywhere else.
Yeah, and I think that this is one where it's an interesting one getting comps. But I think like Seattle Geno Smith is not a terrible comp at all.
That's my comp.
I think, and people, you say that, and people are like, I don't really want that. But at the end of the day, Geno's been very solid there in terms of the fantasy production. And I think that if we had longevity with Geno in a good spot, that could be it. So Shedeur can make all of the throws. Obviously, he's got the pro lineage. This has been a player who's been in the spotlight. He can handle a big media market. So I think that's fine at the 104. 105 here, I could go a million directions. I could go wide receiver here.
Yes, you can.
I could go running back. And I'm going to go with a guy that I think I'm going to be higher on than most at this point. And I'll have a little caveat here that like my running backs 2 through 6 can all change around. And anybody who's unwilling to change their rankings from January up until Dynasty rookie drafts time is just not paying attention to all the great information we're going to get at like the Senior Bowl, at the draft combine, at the actual NFL draft landing spots and draft capital. But for me, Omarion Hampton, I think, is going to be drafted very highly. I think he has the size. He had over 2,000 combined yards this year at UNC at 220 pounds, and he did it the year after Drake May is gone. We have a great success rate in fantasy of players who had 1,500 rushing yards and 15 rushing touchdowns in the ACC. The last players to do it, and the only players who have done it, are Lamar Jackson, Travis Etienne, Omarion Hampton, and Dalvin Cook. So that I know it's a little I'm cherry picking stats there, but this is a guy with back-to-back 1,500 yard, 15 touchdown seasons, and the fact that he did it alongside Drake May and then had to do it by himself this year. Again, the prototypical size and the fact that I think his draft capital is going to be very high. I think he'll be a top 40 pick. The problem is there's going to be a few running backs that are top 40 picks. So this one could move around, but I'm very into the Omarion Hampton profile.
Yeah, he's my other blue chip on there. I got to regrade some of these, so I might have 4 because I moved back and forth with Judkins. The only reason why Omarion Hampton, everyone's just like, oh, why is he almost in the second round of your rankings? And I'm like, well, again, it's pre-draft, and I go everything off grades, and tight end pushes a lot of this talent down pre-draft, going purely on scouting grades without landing spots. And like guys like Evan Stewart that I've had on here, he's declared. Isaiah Bond has fallen a little bit. Omarion Hampton is someone I love a lot. And again, I talk about fallen talent. Omarion Hampton, Kaleb Johnson, Judkins, one of these guys are going to fall to then that first round are going to be the value of your draft, probably. Just especially in Superflex, just because of landing spot and just because wide receiver tends to hold a lot of value. So my next one, I'm gonna take the risky one. I'm taking Travis Hunter at this point. I'm not going to let him fall. Like I said enough about him. I think he is a freaky athlete. He understands separation, and I think that comes from playing cornerback really well. He understands space, separation, and has some of the best ball skills at anybody.
Yeah, I mean, we don't really need to say anything else. The guy's incredibly talented. We talked about him at length earlier. This is another difficult decision here. I could go with a wide receiver, and certainly the longevity of the position. This would be sort of the game theory way to play Dynasty, is to take one of these blue chip wide receivers away from the other members of my league. But I'm going to lean back into the running back position. When I drafted with Cody Carpentier, I had Kaleb Johnson ahead. After the national title game, I'm going to push Quinshon Judkins up. This is a guy who was neck and neck for me. And again, running backs 2 through 5 for me, I can move around at any time. Because I really like all of them, and I think all of them have a chance to be RB1s or very early on in their career in Dynasty. But for me, with Quinshon Judkins, this is a blue chip guy. This is a guy who had the most rushing yards in SEC history besides Herschel Walker as a freshman. He had back-to-back years with 15-plus rushing scores at Ole Miss. Transfers to Ohio State, gets another double-digit rushing touchdown season. He's 6 feet tall. He's 220. And he would have been the RB1 last year if he was eligible. I would have taken him ahead of Jonathan Brooks. So I'm happy to get him here. And I think this is about right for where he'll end up in our Superflex drafts.
Yeah, I kind of hinted at this. I've swapped him and Henderson back and forth and Hampton. It's just like, you had a good week. Let me move you up. I love all these guys here. I love that you left my favorite though. I'm finally gonna go running back here, and I'm gonna take TreVeyon Henderson. Um, I made a comp, and I didn't mean this as a stylistic comp when I said Jahmyr Gibbs. I just think that his skill set and the way how good he is on third down, how good of a blocker he is, it's like Kyron Williams with a lot more juice and how a team could use him. So I could see someone like Henderson being the RB2 or closer to RB1 in this class because he is so skilled on third down and in the receiving game.
I'll give a shout out to Garrett Price of Dynasty Nerds, also a repeat guest here on Dynasty Life. He had your exact same Kyron for Henderson, but he also said it was like the best traits of Kyron Williams and the best traits of Chase Brown sort of combining on one guy. So
that's
congratulations, Garrett. Your comp is now our comp. We're gonna all share that one together. But yeah, check out Garrett's work. He's really good as well. So Henderson goes. So now my sort of the run on running backs, I'm gonna lean into it. I'm gonna close out my top tier. I'm gonna take Kaleb Johnson. I understand Jagger's apprehension and some of the potential red flags he sees, but I'll take the glass half full approach here. This is another 220-pound back. Just an explosive player in terms of hits the hole, is able to churn out yards. I think NFL teams are going to look at him as a guy who can handle 20-plus carries in a game if it's called upon with the game script, and did show us, like, Iowa's a hard place to evaluate receiving talent, but he did take a step forward and had 22 receptions this year, which is something that he didn't show as a freshman, and then certainly was a little banged up in year two. But what's interesting was comes out of the gates, sets the Iowa record for rushing yardage as a freshman, and then this year just took that huge step forward, accounted for over 40% of Iowa's total offense. I think he's a beast. And like Henderson, Judkins, Hampton, and certainly Jeanty, Johnson's a guy that I'm very confident will be a second-round pick, and probably all five of them are inside the top 45. There's a renaissance at the running back position in the NFL, and I think the NFL is going to realize what this class is, and you'll see a run on these guys begin in the second round.
Yeah. This is pretty fun because like you're reaching for guys that I wouldn't take so soon, so you're letting me have
I'm letting you get your guy.
Yeah, so like I'm going to be honest, Kaleb Johnson though, like I tell everyone, I'm like, yeah, I have him right now, but if he goes to the Cowboys, he's he's probably like a top 3 pick in Dynasty. That's how running back works.
Chargers, Broncos, like Vikings end of the first round, the entire start of the second round. Like when you go from the beginning of the second round, Cleveland at the beginning of the second round, all the way down to like that Dallas, and I'm forgetting maybe one team below Dallas, but you have like the first 15 picks of the second round where our heads are just going to explode in terms of the potential volume these guys will see as the rookies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's I mean, it's like I tell everyone now, like everything matters, but like right now it doesn't matter too much, and you don't want to really count too many eggs because, like, again, I still remember Tank Bigsby getting drafted and Zach Charbonnet getting drafted. I'm like, what are you guys doing? And, it's like he should have been a Bengal or something like that. So that's what I'm worried about. Like, which one of these teams are going to take a running back that already has one just because they love them? And I bet the Broncos will do something wild like that and get 2.
They'll end up being a few, but with the depth of this class, there's also going to be more chances for a guy like a Bucky Irving, a Tyrone Tracy type situation where it's just so deep that we can get down to like running back 14, running back 15, and be like, okay, this guy could come in and still be a starter. So I'm with you. There's going to be such landing spots we don't like. It happens every single year, and certainly the running back spot. You bring up Charbonnet, that was like pure depression. And then the flip side, around later, Devon Achane lands in Miami, and it was like the gold. Yeah. So, it's like sliding doors in fantasy football when it comes to the NFL draft.
Next guy I'm going to take, and I just actually finished my scouting report on him. I love this kid. He's been a Devi darling. It's Luther Burden Luther Burden is my wide receiver 2 right now. A lot of people think he's a gadget player. That is indicative of Brady Cook in Missouri and less about Luther Burden. He's another one. And I talk about Brian Thomas. I'm not throwing this around. I'm talking about athleticism. When you see someone who is just the superior athlete on the field, and it's not just like a Kadarius Toney. This kid has polish. Downfield, he gets open a lot. He could easily play the Z role. If anything, I think that he's Zay Flowers, except he has none of those athletic concerns that we had with Zay Flowers, even though he's still pretty athletic. He teleports all over the field. I really love him on fade routes. And yes, he's going to get manufactured touches, but you'd be foolish for a team to not manufacture touches for him.
I like how you said that. Certainly was a blue chip type guy, stayed in state. We saw him have a 1,200-yard season in the SEC. I think people are sort of overthinking the profile. We don't love seeing a guy have like regression in terms of his production. The last year we have him in college, but I think the NFL teams are not going to care. He's going to get the draft capital. And that's a guy where you bring up some interesting athletic guys. I'll say that there's a little bit of DJ Moore athletically to him. Like he's a real athlete. This is not a guy we have any questions about in terms of his athleticism, dynamic with the ball in his hands. I could go a number of directions again here at 11 overall, but I'm going to take Emeka Egbuka, wide receiver, Ohio State. For me, this is a guy where the potential wide receiver 1 seasons, I'm not sure. I think this is a guy that's going to be a wide receiver 2 multiple times in his career, power slot, ready to step right into an NFL team. I think he'll get the first round draft capital. I liked him last year. I think he would have been a guy last year we would have been very excited to draft. This year, the class is not quite as good. I'm pushing him up into this range. I could have gone tight end. I could have gone running back. But to me, Egbuka, very safe player to take in this range.
Yeah, power slot is like you said it. Like everyone who's saying, I've heard Egbuka. I've heard the craziest comps for, and I'm like, man, he's the easiest power slot I've ever seen in my life. It's like if there's anything to comp him as, and to me, that comes down to usage. Yeah, he could play like Amon-Ra St. Brown, but is someone going to use him like that? Or let's say the Rams, who exclusively throw from the slot. And yeah, they put Puka out wide sometimes in there, but they really like to play within the hashes there. So it really just depends on that landing spot. And then slightly back to Luther Burden, because I know that you know this and you were there to see it. I think we've seen our great right Buffalo. I think we're going to get Percy Harvin back. That's what I want. So, but here I'm going to be
Jagger. Are you like age labeling me or something? You're saying that I was around the Percy Harvin era? Yes, I was. I did see Percy Harvin. Got it.
I deal with Jeff all the time. So sometimes when we get talked to stuff and I'll talk to someone else who's like, well, I don't know who Percy Harvin is. I'm like, you don't know who Percy Harvin is? That's wild. It's probably one of the best football players that who was and never was at the same time.
Yes.
So, I'm going to be the first to take a tight end. I've been really high on this guy. I think he's the tight end 1 of this class for fantasy. When I've written my scouting reports, depending on what an NFL team wants, there's 3 different profiles for what they want on a tight end, who their tight end one is. But for fantasy, I want the guy who can earn targets. I mean, he literally had the greatest tight end season ever. It's Harold Fannin Jr. for me. I'm just enamored with this dude.
Yeah, I love it. I love Harold. And when people are like, did he really have the greatest tight end season? Yes, he did. He had like 150 targets, 117 receptions, 1,500 receiving yards. And then they'll say, okay, Jagger, but he played it in the MAC. He played at Bowling Green. But then the two games he had against elite teams, he ripped them up. Penn State, Texas A&M. So, yeah, like I'm with you. This is a guy that I think classic move tight end, landing spot's going to matter. We want to have him land well. This is not a guy who's going to be like, there's other tight ends in this draft class who are much better blockers. But Fannin Jr. is your move tight end. If he lands well, wheels up. And there's some people saying that he's going to be in some of the wide receiver drills in Mobile at the Senior Bowl just to show off his route running ability. This is a guy that I think he'll be the 3rd drafted tight end in the NFL draft. And I have him tight end 3 in my rankings, but it's like a big 3. But fantasy-wise, I'm with you. If it lands correctly, you're talking about like Evan Ingram type numbers in terms of the amount of targets he can absorb.
Yeah, our comp for him right now is Evan Ingram and Jonnu Smith.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
great. That was good. That's good.
Yeah.
We didn't even talk
So
before the show. We're just on
yeah.
that same wavelength. I love that one. And like, yeah, this is a guy where the story is really cool. Ends up going to the MAC, staying on his team. This is a guy who could have transferred. I love that he tore up the two big teams in that Penn State game. Like, he scored a touchdown on the opening drive. That was like sort of the eye opener for a lot of people. But it's not a 1-year wonder. He had over 1,000 receiving yards last year, over 70 catches last year, and then this year was just like usage king. I'll stay at the tight end spot because the tight end that I think will be the first one drafted that I'm actually very high on, Tyler Warren. And Tyler Warren has a chance to be on the field the entire time. He's going to be 260 pounds, 6'5", 6'6", and also put up really, really silly numbers. And I think when you look at Tyler Warren, it wasn't just that he had the most receptions ever in the Big Ten. If you just took his numbers really and said it was a wide receiver out of Penn State, and we blindly looked at the numbers, you'd be really interested in that profile. So he gets the most receptions ever by a Penn State tight end, most receptions ever by a Big Ten tight end in a game, had that 17-catch game against USC. They used him throughout the college football playoffs, but they also used him as a runner. He had over 200 rushing yards this year as well. Tyler Warren's a guy where I think he'll be a top 20 pick. Ray Garvin comped him to Dallas Clark, another old school comparison. I think that will go a little bit more TJ Hawkinson level tight end. I think that's kind of where he could end up being. I'm high on him, and I do think the draft capital wise, he'll be drafted ahead of Fannin Jr., and I think he'll also go ahead of Colston Loveland, another tight end I'm very, very high on.
Yeah, and that's what I say, pick your poison. I can't hate on anything about him because, like, to me, if you're have that Kyle Shanahan versatility, no block, no rock mentality, Tyler Warren is, like, without the question, the tight end one with that. And then if you want someone, if you like a Mark Andrews, then I want Colston Loveland or something. And then if you want an Evan Ingram, that's where you get your Harold Fannin Jr. I almost want to go tight end again.
Do it.
I'm not. I'm going to get someone else I'm really high on. It's Woody Marks. If there's someone I think I got to move him way up on here. I'm way high on him. My comp for him is almost, I'd say it's irresponsible, Theo. It's irresponsible. It's Jahmyr Gibbs, man. He reminds me of Jahmyr Gibbs. Like, he is fast. I know we loved Marshawn Lloyd. This dude is better than Marshawn Lloyd. He is an elite receiver. He has really good patience behind the line of scrimmage, undersized, so I think he will share backfield for a little bit. But again, if you like TreVeyon Henderson, why wouldn't you like Woody Marks? He's not the blocker, but he's an even more explosive player than Henderson is.
Interesting. He had a 80 catch season at Mississippi State, and this is a guy where I like to keep track of career receptions, and I'll have a little list and a couple. Maybe I'll throw that on X, but it's just career receptions for all the running backs we're into in this draft class, and it's like everybody's listed, and then there's like Woody Marks with like 260 receptions in his career, like a crazy amount. And obviously the COVID season where he played it 5 years. But what's interesting is he took a big step forward as a runner this year, gets his first 1,000-yard season. This is a guy who's going to be at the Senior Bowl. One of these, possibly 2 or 3 of these Senior Bowl backs are going to get a ton of juice this week. Marks is definitely one of them to keep an eye on. Really, really cool to kind of bring up Marshawn Lloyd, because Marshawn Lloyd was similar in the transfers from the SEC to USC, has a strong Senior Bowl, ends up getting drafted on day 2. Woody Marks, I think, can also be a day 2 pick. And when we look at backs with the potential to catch a lot of passes in the NFL, you've got to circle Woody Marks. So I like that one. Good to see you're high on him. I'm going to go. I have a running back I want to use. I have a wide receiver, but I'm just going to close out my tier of tight ends. I'll go Colston Loveland, 6'4", 250. I think athletically, size-wise, he compares to a lot of the tight ends we're seeing thriving. You bring up Evan Engram. We'll bring up Brock Bowers, Trey McBride. It's been sort of like a prototype, this 6'4", 248 to 250, guys that are sort of overgrown wide receivers that NFL teams can create matchups with. Loveland was really good on the national title winning team at Michigan. Nearly had as many receptions as Roman Wilson. And this year was sort of like the guy there. Led Michigan in every single category on a sort of a down offense, but he's a stud. Went from Idaho to Michigan. Come on. There's not too many NFL players out of Idaho. Loveland will be the next one. And like Warren, I think he'll be a first-round pick in the NFL draft. So I'll put Loveland in there, and I'll close out my top 3 tight ends.
Yeah, Loveland, like I said, my comp for him is Mark Andrews. Just how smooth he is. Really love him as a player. I remember scouting Roman Wilson, and I was like, who is this Loveland? Like, who's this tight end? Every play he kept making, I was just like astounded by it. And then I had some Devy supplemental drafts, and I went out of my way to trade back in to go and pick him up because it was like, you're doing that for a tight end. I'm like, yeah, I mean, it's tight end premium, guys. I want a stud when I can get him before you guys figure it out. I'm gonna go back to wide receiver. I have him ranked pretty high, and I'm surprised he's still here. I have him ahead of Egbuka. It's Elic Ayomanor. I think he's one of the smoothest wide receivers in the draft. I worry about his long speed, but if he can have that DeAndre Hopkins like profile, stay fluid, keep playing big, he can be an easy X for a team. Not quite as tall, but I mean, we all saw the big play that he had against, I believe it was Syracuse. We had like the one-handed one. That's the flashy stuff. But watching him move throughout the route, he's probably one of the smoothest in the class.
Yeah, he's a stud. I could have taken him a few picks before, and I think at the end of the day, he would be a wide receiver that I would bet if another guy gets pushed in the first round, I think he's going to be there. He's Canadian, another like interesting storyline guy. He's also going to be in Mobile at the Senior Bowl. You bring up the Syracuse game, and that was an awesome catch. The Colorado game was pretty good too. Yeah. If anybody wants to watch one, he had the game winner matched up against Travis Hunter, sort of mossed him on that one. Mm-hmm. And this was Dion kind of getting in Travis Hunter's face on the sideline after he had like his like 7th catch or something against Colorado in that comeback win. So he's really interesting. I agree with you. This is a guy that's a big-time athlete, prototypical size. Yeah, man, I wish I could maybe undo one of my tight end picks and get a little Ayomanor. So I'm going to take another wide receiver that I want to flag plant a little bit, a guy that I think is going to gain value throughout this entire process, and that's Matthew Golden of Texas. Had a huge game in the SEC championship against Georgia, 160 yards, 149 against Arizona State in that big Texas overtime win. Was a 10-9 100-meter yard dash guy in high school. So I think that based on his over 17 yards per reception in the SEC, his only year at Texas, transferred up from Houston. But with those track numbers as a younger guy, with the explosiveness that he showed, I think the testing numbers are going to be strong. He's an explosive player, and I think that he'll have a great deal of momentum throughout the process. I think he'll end up being like a top 45 pick in the NFL draft. And I think he'll actually get drafted behind Isaiah Bond, but he'll be a guy that we like more for fantasy purposes.
Yeah, he's slipped off my my radar here, and he's on my list today to get through and to look at. Because when we do the rookie guide, anything that I do, Jeff reviews, and anything Jeff does, then I review. So he got Matthew Golden, so I get to put real eyes on him, and I'm excited. I'm gonna go back to tight end again. My tight end 2, I said I really like Loveland as well, but my tight end 2 is actually Mason Taylor out of LSU. When I say he's my tight end 2, it's like fractions of a point, and I had to pick something. I think him and Loveland are pretty similar players. They both, for their size, have very quick feet, move in and out of the breaks well. They both block well. I know at one point Brugler had him as a tight end 1. I think he still has him as like a top 3 guy. Tight end, like I said, this is a strong class, guys. If you're in like a two-start tight end league, or I'm in a 2-start tight end premium league, this is a year to fix a lot of your sins if you've messed that position up.
Yeah, he's got the NFL lineage as well, Jason Taylor, all that stuff. And the numbers were never going to be extreme because he played alongside Brian Thomas, and also Malik Neighbors. So definitely an athlete, and he's going to have that draft capital. He might get drafted ahead of Harold Fannin. Mason Taylor can end up being, like, again, a top 40 pick at the tight end position. This is one where it's interesting. I could go back to the wide receiver spot. I could push a quarterback in. I'm going to go Isaiah Bond, because I think Isaiah Bond, at the end of the day, this is a player that is going to run exceptionally well at the combine. I think there's a chance he's the fastest wide receiver in the class. And I think Isaiah Bond made enough plays at Alabama where he was on an upwards trajectory, where if he didn't transfer to Texas this year, he dealt with a couple of injuries. This is a guy where I think he could have had a massive year at Alabama. Instead, dealt with a few injuries at Texas. Also had a couple of really big moments. He gets open and he's fast, and I think he's going to have the draft capital. And it's sort of a premium guy that's been around for a while. Got on the field as a freshman, early breakout type guy at Alabama.
Yeah, for both him and the guy I'm going to take next, I've said in my scouting reports that you want to take notice of players that Alabama took notice in early on. You want to mark them down. And you said, the injuries, I think, held him back a lot this season. But I think he took a lot of the things that Adonai Mitchell and Xavier Worthy did well, and you kind of put that into one player. And I'm not, he's not as fast as Worthy, obviously, but he's bigger, has a little bit more of that size, and that's why I have him near AD Mitchell. Ja'Cory Brooks is going to be mine. That's another Alabama transfer to Louisville. He's a bit old at this point. He's a big receiver. He plays big. It says he's under 200. He looks under 200, but that doesn't really bother him. He reminds me right now, my comp is Martavis Bryant. He just plays long, really uses his length, could separate. My only concern about him is he has a case of the drops. He doesn't always play through. Like when you see like Ayomanor, he follows through with the catch. He completes them. I don't quite see that from Brooks all the time, and that's why I think he's going to fall to the second or third round. But he's someone that I definitely could see having an X role on a team right away.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, and I've seen that you've been higher on him throughout the process than many. I don't think old matters as much anymore. We talked about it earlier.
Yeah.
We saw last year with Xavier Legette, COVID and guys getting paid with NIL. They're
made everything weird.
Yeah, it's weird. So yeah, I'm open to Ja'Cory Brooks, and it shows sort of the depth of the class. I'm going to remind myself that this is a super flex draft, and I'm going to go with the guy that I think will gain value in Mobile. It's not Jalen Milroe. It's actually Jaxson Dart of Ole Miss. I think he's got a very strong arm. There's certain traits with Dart where I don't want to get sort of ahead of myself, because we've seen Ole Miss quarterbacks look good and it doesn't really translate. Matt Corral, certain guys like that where I thought he'd be better in the pros than he was. Jaxson Dart, though, I think with a strong week in Mobile, sort of a mixed bag where some people really like him and see him as a guy who could sneak in the first. Some people see him as like a third, fourth rounder. I'll take a bet that this is going to be a really strong week for him. At this time last year, and I certainly don't think he's at this level right now, Michael Penix and Bo Nix were fringe first rounders, where there weren't a whole lot of people just pounding the table saying these guys are going to be first round picks. Helped themselves in Mobile. They weren't even the best player in Mobile at the quarterback spot. That was Spencer Rattler. But they did enough down there that the NFL teams were like, this is a guy. And the scarcity of the position, this draft class is screaming for a quarterback 3. I think it's going to be Jaxson Dart. I'm going to flag plant him and take him right here.
Yeah, I'm big on him. He's always looked better. And when you're, I guess this is my first year releasing it to the public and actually publishing these scouting grades. And when he comes out towards the end, the number it spits out, it's like, man, maybe I should, nerf these numbers a little bit, because it doesn't seem very well, but he does a lot right. And you got to love Lane Kiffin and what he does there, and with the talent. He runs a lot of pro style stuff. So I'm probably going to take some shots on Jaxson Dart. I'm going to take another favorite, going back to wide receiver, Xavier Restrepo. He's probably going to be a third round pick in the NFL because he's a strict slot, but he's going to be one of these guys. I think we're going to pump him up in fantasy because he's a target hog. He's probably the crispiest route runner in the class. He's tough. He plays bigger than his size. He's stockier. He's like almost 200 pounds, built like a running back at 5'10". But this kid does it all. And what I like about him most is his IQ. It's the little things. When the play breaks down, if he's shallow, he goes deep. If he's deep, he comes back. He always seems to be in the right spot. I'm going to own a gross amount of Restrepo.
Yeah. Brett Whitefield, shout out to Brett Whitefield, who I did a press coverage with from Fantasy Points. He loves Restrepo as well. Just a big time route runner and a guy who had 1,000 receiving yards back-to-back years at Miami. He could be a guy that could gain a lot of value at the Senior Bowl. Senior Bowl has a way of elevating wide receivers. We saw it last year, certainly with Ladd McConkey, where the highlights of Ladd McConkey just abusing these defensive backs in Mobile, and you're like, oh my God. And Roman Wilson at the same way had a ton of juice. Restrepo could be that guy that just is unguardable this week or next week coming up. We're coming up here on pick number 23 overall. And this is a tough one because I want to cram in like 7 running backs here, but I'm gonna put in Dylan Sampson, and I think Dylan Sampson is really, really good. This is a guy where I could push him up. It has 1,500 rushing yards this year. Also, as a receiver, only 20 receptions, but it wasn't really asked to do that. Last year, alongside Jalen Wright, who was a guy where I liked Jalen Wright, Sampson had 600 rushing yards and also nearly 200 as a receiver alongside of him. He's also 20 years old. We've been seeing more of these like 200-pound backs making instant impacts in the NFL. For me, Sampson could be that next like sub 200 guy that comes in, gets late day 2 draft capital, and excels. I think he could be a guy who has big-time explosive runs, had a number of games this year where he was really, really, really good. That Tennessee team leaned on him a ton. And again, 1,500 rushing yards in the SEC in really his only year as the featured back. I think he's got some momentum. But again, I could say Damian Martinez. I could say Devin Neal. There's a bunch of running backs I could love to cram in here. But I'll say Sampson, clean profile for me. Not a whole lot of question marks other than the weight.
I'm a known Sampson hater. So I'll let you have that one.
Okay.
Sampson hater.
Well, expand on that. Give us one or two things you don't like.
Tennessee's known to inflate their offensive talent. It's like year in and year out we're seeing it, and I think he's a product of that. He reminds me of Michael Carter and Kyron Williams, but not in the fun Kyron Williams way I meant with Henderson. He's one I'm a little out of any of them that we've disagreed on, he's one I probably won't own any of them until I'm like super wrong. Let's say if Jerry Jones says Dylan Sampson's our guy, I'll be a Dylan Sampson guy. But I don't know. I got to see it then. I always have one running back who I just pick on and hate. And then in year 3 in the NFL, after he's got his 3,000-yard season, I'm like, well, I guess I was wrong.
Well, we'll just clip it. Jagger May compares Dylan Sampson to Kyron Williams. That's the clip.
Yeah.
That's the clip.
Yeah, it could be good or bad. So I'm going to go. Yeah, you mentioned Devin Neal. Devin Neal's been hot. I want to talk to people about someone else you should know. It's Tai Felton. I'm a big Tai Felton guy. He played wide receiver for Maryland. He's one of the best deep threats in this class. He's really narrow, but he does a really good job at separating and avoiding contact, particularly like on press. He really can scoot by people and stay on time. And again, I think he's one of the best X wide receivers, has a lot of Mike Wallace to his game. And I think he's someone that he'll get day 2 capital, but he could be a perennial starter on a team because of his skill set. And he was really productive for Maryland as well. So I'm curious to see when the data guys are going to get a hold of him.
Big time production. This was really, really fun. I'm sure this won't be the last time we discuss this class. And post Senior Bowl, a lot of things are going to change. Jagger, highly recommend your work. Let everybody know where they can find it.
Find me on Jag Says on Twitter. I'm at Football Guys. All my stuff's over there. Especially for rookie content. That's basically my life until April. So,
well, enjoy. It should be a lot. It should be a lot of fun. And then post April, you're going to have to get ready for those Dynasty rookie drafts including your own Dynasty rookie drafts in that sort of mad scramble that we have. Stick with us here at Dynasty Life all offseason long. We're your place to find great guests. We're going to be breaking down this 2025 rookie class all the way up until the big day in the NFL draft. We'll see you soon.
Hey, I want to thank you for being part of this broadcast. If you have any thoughts on it, leave a comment. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a like. And if you want to see more shows on the Player Profiler channel, subscribe to it. That's how we know you want more.